They say you can't own rainwater, but try telling that to my HOA. It all started with a few barrels I placed under my gutter to collect rain for my garden. Nothing fancy, just trying to save water and do my part. But then one morning, I noticed they were gone. At first, I thought maybe someone stole them. Then I got a notice from the HOA saying collecting rainwater is against community rules and that they'd removed the barrels themselves. I was stunned. It wasn't like I was flooding the neighborhood or causing damage. I was literally just saving water for my tomatoes. That's when I realized this was bigger than just some rule. They weren't just taking my barrels, they were redirecting the rainwater from my roof into their office's landscaping system. My own runoff, being used by the same people who told me I couldn't have it. The irony, they never even asked. No warnings, no discussion, just silence and then control. I tried to talk to them, reason with them, even sent emails. Nothing. So I got creative. Let's just say, I found a way to let nature do the talking. And when the next big storm rolled through, things got interesting, real fast. What happened at their office next? You're not gonna believe it. Now, before I get to what actually happened during that storm, let me take you back a little, because this wasn't the first weird issue I'd had with the HOA. Ever since I moved into this neighborhood, the homeowners association had this habit of stepping over boundaries. Like, one time I got a fine for leaving my trash cans out for an hour too long. Another time they cited me for improper garden layout, whatever that means. But the rainwater thing, that was the final straw. It felt personal. I did some digging. Turns out, the HOA installed a hidden system to funnel runoff from common areas into their building's irrigation lines. That's legal, fine, but they were also quietly tapping into runoff from private properties, including mine, without permission. That's when I knew it wasn't just about enforcing rules, they were benefiting from them. I talked to a couple neighbors. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who had barrels confiscated or found strange drains installed near their property lines. But no one wanted to speak up. Most people were just tired, afraid of more fines, or just didn't want drama. I get it, but I wasn't about to let it slide. So I started watching, measuring, learning how the water flowed, where it came from, and exactly where it was going. And that's when I saw my chance. I started documenting everything. Every time it rained, I'd go outside with my phone, tracking where the water was being redirected. Sure enough, I found a small, almost hidden trench along the side of my yard, something I never approved. It led straight into a shared drainage pipe that fed into the HOA's irrigation system. My roof runoff, my property, somehow feeding their flower beds. It was subtle, almost smart, but not legal, and definitely not okay. At this point, I wasn't just annoyed. I felt invaded. I reached out to the HOA board again, asking for a meeting. They'd brushed me off with some vague message about community standards and how they were ensuring consistent aesthetics. Aesthetics? We're talking about rainwater, not neon lawn ornaments. Then something odd happened. A neighbor 2 houses down, let's call her Lisa, came over one evening. She whispered like someone might be listening. She told me she caught a maintenance guy digging near her backyard months ago, without notice. Said they installed a new drain there too. She filed a complaint, but never heard back. Now the garden was always dry, while the HOA's front lawn looked like a golf course. We both knew this wasn't just about policy anymore. It felt like control. And the more we talked, the clearer it became. We weren't just fighting a rule. We were up against a system. That night, after talking to Lisa, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how many other homes might have been tapped into without permission. The HOA wasn't just enforcing ridiculous rules. They were quietly setting up a network, using our homes as part of their private water system. And no one was stopping them. Most folks either didn't notice or didn't want to poke the bear. But I was done being quiet. So I started sketching out a plan, not to break anything, not to cause harm, just to give them a taste of what they've been doing to us. I spent a few weekends redirecting my own downspout legally, everything on my property, no lines crossed. But instead of letting it run into the trench they dug, I made sure it flowed right where it naturally would have gone, if they hadn't meddled with it. And I added just one small adjustment, a flow diverter. By evening, the clouds rolled in. Thunder started rumbling. I stood by the window, watching as the first drops fell. I knew what was coming. What they didn't know was that this time, the water was finally going to speak for itself. The rain started slow, steady, then it picked up. Within an hour, my gutters were pouring, and the diverter kicked in, just like I planned. I watched the water run down the path it was always meant to follow, free of the trench they carved out without asking. But just as I was feeling that rush of quiet satisfaction, something unexpected happened. Lisa called. Her voice was shaky. She said she'd just seen a truck pull up behind the HOA office. After hours, two men in ponchos were out in the rain, fiddling with the building's drainage system. One of them, the same maintenance guy who dug near her yard. She said it looked like they were trying to reroute something, maybe even preparing for overflow. It hit me. They knew. Somehow, they figured out what I was planning. Or maybe they'd noticed the changes around my downspout. Either way, they weren't just sitting back anymore. They were trying to outmaneuver me. The storm wasn't even halfway through, and it had already become a standoff. I threw on a jacket and walked out into the rain. The streets were glossy, quiet, but charged with energy. I headed toward the office. I had to see what they were doing. But when I turned the corner, I froze. Water wasn't just running, it was pooling. Fast, and not where I expected. Something had gone wrong. Or maybe exactly right. I stood there soaked, watching the water rush past the storm drains like they weren't even there. The trench the HOA carved along my yard had backfired. Without my runoff feeding their hidden system, everything was off balance. The flow had overwhelmed their piping, and now it was backing up, straight toward their office. I ran closer, heart racing. The two maintenance guys were knee-deep in water, scrambling with a wrench and a hose, yelling over the sound of the storm. One of them slipped and fell. The other spotted me and shouted something, but I couldn't hear over the wind and thunder. That's when I saw it. Water was pouring into the back of their office through a side vent, completely unplanned, completely out of control. But here's the twist. This wasn't just from my property. I turned and saw Lisa standing in the rain behind me. She nodded, then pointed. Two other neighbors were out too, checking their yards. Somehow, someway, others had made changes too. Everyone had gotten tired of being stepped on. I wasn't alone. By morning, the HOA office was a mess. Not destroyed, but definitely drenched. They tried to blame the storm, but people started talking about the hidden drains, the forced runoff, the barrels, and when enough of us came forward, they had no choice but to listen for once. The days after the storm were quiet, but not in the usual way. It was the kind of quiet where people start looking around, really noticing things. The HOA office stayed shut for 2 full days. Then, out of nowhere, they sent out a community update about the drainage infrastructure and how the storm had revealed areas in need of improvement. No mention of the redirected water, the confiscated rain barrels, or the silent trenches running through our yards. But the damage was done, not just to the office, but to their control. Lisa and I, along with a few others, decided to attend the next board meeting in person. We weren't angry, just firm. We shared photos, diagrams, even emails. It wasn't about revenge. It was about being heard. The board looked stunned at first. Maybe they didn't think we'd come together. But we did, and that changed everything. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. The HOA quietly returned a few barrels, including mine. They agreed to revisit the water policy and install transparent drainage plans with homeowner input. More importantly, neighbors who used to stay quiet started speaking up. Turns out, when people see someone take a stand, without breaking the rules, just standing firm. It inspires them. As for me, I still collect rainwater, legally, on my own property, for my own garden, and now no one's rerouting anything without my say. The best part, the tomatoes are thriving. What started as one rain barrel turned into something bigger, a reminder that just because someone's in charge doesn't mean they're always right. Sometimes you've got to trace the flow, ask questions, and trust that standing up for what's fair, even when it's uncomfortable, can shift everything. If you're in a neighborhood dealing with a tricky HOA or weird rules, don't ignore it. Don't let the silence win. Start small. Watch, listen, ask around. You might find that others feel the same way, and together you can do a lot without breaking a single rule.